Hey, how's it going, and welcome to another JoJo's Bizarre Adventure video. I almost said another JoJo June video, force of habit, but yeah, the day that this is going up, August 19th, it has officially been 1 year since JoJo Lands was announced. Yeah, no, this thing wasn't announced 2 months ago, it was last year. And in that time, we have heard essentially nothing about it. Literally, all that we know is the title, and even then, it's still a tentative title. Like, the name JoJo Lands might change. But, like, I don't really mind waiting because Araki has been putting out JoJo's Bizarre Adventure since 1986, before most of us were probably alive. So yeah, I think the man definitely deserves a break. But yeah, this year-long gap has definitely given us a lot of time to think, and I figured since there's not really too much else going on, I'd take a bit to kind of talk about some of my, like, theories and speculations about what JoJo Lands is going to be like. And I definitely want to preface this video by saying that this is all so speculative. Like, I am making guesses about something that the only thing we know about it is the name, and the name is not permanent, so a lot of this could end up being totally wrong. This isn't like a predictions video, and it's not even necessarily like a this is what I want to see from JoJo Lands. This is pretty much just me speculating based on like context clues, based on stuff that happened in Jojolion. Also, if you have not read Jojolion, I will be spoiling like the entire thing, since a lot of the stuff that happens in Jojolion I think is going to be very critical to part 9. And I say that especially because this is something that I'm fairly confident in, is that JoJo Lands will be the third part in a trilogy with Steel Ball Run and Jojolion. Since to kind of take a step back, when Jojolion first started, it seemed like it had essentially nothing to do with Steel Ball Run. It was set like, what, 140, or more like 120 years in the future. It took place in Japan instead of the United States like part 7 did. Just seemed like it had nothing to do with anything in Steel Ball Run, but the more we learned about it, the more we realized that, like, Jojolion was quite literally, like, essentially a direct follow-up to Steel Ball Run. Like, we saw how Johnny Joestar's, like, lineage kind of played out. We saw the Spin make a return. And at the very, very end of the part, we got to see Lucy Steel again. So, yeah, that's something that I'm pretty confident in saying, is that I'm pretty positive that Part 9 will be pretty much a direct follow-up to Jojolion. Since it seems pretty apparent that this is going to be like a trilogy in the same way that like parts 1, 2, and 3 were. Now, I don't think it'll be so direct of a sequel to where it's like, oh man, Josuke is getting up to a new adventure with Yasuho and the Higashikata family in Morio again. I think that's pretty unlikely. I do think we'll see some returning characters from Jojolion, but I'll kind of get back to that in a second. But the setting of JoJo Lands is definitely something that people have been kind of speculating about for a while. Like, throughout the years, Araki has said that he would like to, like, visit a couple of different locations for future JoJo parts. At one point in an interview, now keep in mind, this was back in 2007, this was 15 years ago, Araki mentioned that he wanted to draw Morio again in parts 8 and 9. So I think it's possible that he might go back to, like, Morio for part 9, but to be honest, I just don't really see it, like, happening that way, because, like, you gotta keep in mind, Jojolion was running for 10 years. Comparatively, you know how long part 4 was? Part 4 ran for 3 years. So I just kind of get the feeling that, like, Araki would probably have some amount of, like, location fatigue from doing Morio again. Especially if Part 9 is going to be another decade-long fucking epic, right? So I feel like that one's pretty unlikely. He has also stated he would like to do Northern Europe and the Scottish Highlands. He said that in 2016. So I think that's definitely a more, like, possible contender, because he said that, you know, that was quite a bit ago, but those are definitely possibilities. Like I said, this is all guesswork, but I'm going to do something slightly omega-brained, and I'm going to use the tentative title as kind of a basis to work off of. Since, at least to me, the title JoJo Lands definitely invokes a lot of feelings of adventure and discovery, going on some sort of expedition, right? So I kind of get the feeling, this is something that I both kind of like feel and also want. I get the feeling that Araki this time around might want to do something just totally different from what he's done in the past. Since throughout this series we've gone from, like, you know, world travels, going from Japan to Egypt, then we've gone to Morio twice, we've gone on expeditions across the entirety of the United States, So this is something that I think would be really cool, and it'd also be something that ties back into the story of Jojolion. But I think it would be very cool if Part 9 takes place in basically the areas surrounding like Australia, New Guinea, and all the like kind of Pacific islands. Since we know that the origin of the Lokakaka is New Guinea, and that the fruit hasn't been like properly documented since during World War II. Essentially what happened is the fruit was known to the locals in New Guinea, then the Japanese army invaded during World War II. And ever since then it's sort of just been undocumented. But back in 1941 we got to see how Toru went and planted a Lokakaka in the orchard. So I don't know if JoJo Lands will directly follow up the story with the Lokakaka. I don't feel like it will be the central source of conflict again, but I do feel like the Lokakaka will play a role. So I think that's definitely a story that could be told, is like the origin of the Lokakaka, kind of like why it exists, what exactly happened in World War II to make it like just seemingly vanish off the face of the earth. And I think this would also work as a setting just because, like I said, it's something that's so outside of what Araki has usually done. Like, here's a map of some of the islands in the surrounding areas. Have you ever heard of a lot of these places before in your life? Also, like, Hawaii is right over there. Dude, we could go to fucking Hawaii. Part 9 set in Hawaii, that'd be awesome. But yeah, I think that would just be a really, really cool concept for a story, is like this sort of island hopping adventure in the Pacific Ocean. Maybe we start off in Australia, and then we go to New Guinea, and then we hop around these various islands. We go to New Zealand, and then we go to Hawaii. This whole, space is one of the locations that Araki has just never really gone to in the story. You know, there's been a lot of stuff in European countries, a lot of stuff in the United States, but never anything like this. And I think if you're kind of looking for kind of an explanation as to why Araki has taken such a long break, assuming he is doing some kind of setting that is really unique, I'd imagine the man is spending a long time either really researching or possibly even visiting some of these places. Visiting might be a little questionable just due to world events of the past couple of years, but I could totally see that being just what Araki has been up to, because since I think the man has a genuine desire to kind of depict these places accurately. Since every time we would go to a new place in Part 3, we'd learn a little bit about, the customs of the people there, or the food that they eat. And when he was coming up with the concept for Steel Ball Run, he actually took a trip across America just to kind of, get an idea of exactly how big the landscape is. And in Part 6 especially, I think he did a really good job depicting what people from Florida look like. So I think that's definitely something that he's kind of been up to, regardless of what the setting ends up being. It seems like whenever he decides, alright, I want to kind of, depict this story in a place I'm kind of unfamiliar with, he really takes the time to actually research these places and make sure that, he knows what he's actually drawing. And I think that's especially important for my, total shot in the dark guess about where the setting could be, since these are places that most people probably really don't know anything about. It's easy enough to make a story that's set in Italy and be like, yeah, Italians like pizza and gelato ice cream, and all their names come from just Italian words for food. This guy is named Fish. So if I'm correct about this, I could definitely see him kind of taking some extra time to really make sure that he knows kind of about the culture and the histories of these places, and to at least try not to depict this stuff in a way that could be viewed as insensitive. So as for kind of the time or the year when this takes place, this one is kind of tricky, since with the exception of Part 7, which was kind of a unique case, JoJo parts have always taken place, after the one that preceded it. And Part 9, I think, will definitely be the same situation. What I'm trying to, kind of figure out here is exactly how many years will have passed. But right now, my two, I think, kind of most likely candidates are, it's either going to take place just a couple of years after Jojolion. Jojolion took place the same year it started, in 2011. So it'll either happen, a couple of years, maybe 2016 or 2017 or so. Or it'll take place several years past us, so something 2027 or something. Since I definitely think Araki and probably most storytellers who are trying to depict kind of modern human history are gonna be pretty wary about telling a story that takes place between the years 2020 and 2022, just due to world events, right? Since it's one of those things where it's just put yourself in Araki's shoes for a second. You're writing a story about presumably world travel in the year 2020. Or even right now in 2022, right? And you're sort of faced with two options essentially, right? It's either you can ignore what happened and then have a bunch of people be like, wait, what happened to the coronavirus? Yeah, that's gonna be the next JoJo Lands video I do, is like, does the coronavirus happen in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure? But no, like, you can either say, yeah, it happened, like, I'm being faithful to actual, like, human history, and then you have to, like, fool around with a lot of realism stuff that nobody wants to deal with. It's like, you know, Josuke's all Yasuho, I want to go to Australia. Oh, Josuke, we can't, the country's locked down. It's like, that's just a pain in the fucking ass. Nobody wants to do that. That's no fun. And then you can kind of do it the other way around where it's like, it just didn't happen. And then you have a bunch of people who are like, I noticed that the new JoJo stand wasn't wearing a mask. Like, you want to explain, Araki? So, you know, it's just one of those things where no matter what, it's just a pain in the fucking ass, right? So yeah, that's why I think, like, ultimately this just comes down to, like, ease of storytelling, essentially. I think it would probably be just easier to tell the story either in, like, years before 2020 or quite a ways into the future. But like I said, I could be totally wrong. Maybe Araki just starts this bitch up and it's 2023 and it's like, whatever, fuck it, it's been long enough. Josuke can go look for the Lokakuka now or whatever, but... So speaking of characters from Jojolion, I think most of them will not make a reappearance. I kind of just get this vibe that, especially the Higashikata family, will probably not make another appearance. Maybe they will, could be totally wrong about that, but I do think it's pretty likely that we'll see Josuke again. I think it's pretty possible that whoever the new JoJo might be, and I'll talk about who that could theoretically be in a bit, but I think it's definitely possible that Josuke might be looking in the origins of the Lokakuka. Like, him looking for a method to help out his mom, Holly, is definitely a very strong, like, character motivation. I could see him kind of, like, going on an adventure to try to find just a way to help her out, right? Alright, so this next one, you're gonna be like, what the fuck are you talking about? But I feel like it is very, very likely that we will see Carrera again. So Carrera is a character that many people probably forgot. She only really shows up for her own, like, arc, which takes place across about 4 chapters. And then she shows up in flashbacks a couple of times, but for whatever reason, Carrera definitely strikes me as a character that Araki has plans for. First of all, Carrera would definitely have a kind of like a logical reason to show up in the story because she's an agricultural student. Like, she went to the same school as Josefumi. And I think she would definitely have kind of like a vested interest in learning more about the Lokakuka. Obviously, she's an agricultural student. Just the very fact that the fruit exists at all would probably be really interesting to her. She was also kind of like infatuated with Josefumi, and she knows that they performed an equivalent exchange, so... God, Carrera acted like a fucking filthy animal in the manga. She looks like she doesn't really shower that often. Alright, now this is like a shot in the dark guess, but if I'm right, you all owe me $1 million. I think there is a possibility that Carrera and Josuke will show up again as a couple. Now, I hear you crying, Yasuho and Josuke shippers. And my reasoning for this is based on some sort of really fucked up, like, anti-logic, but at some point, Josuke, when he, like, first meets Carrera, he makes a comment along the lines of, like, she's the kind of woman I will never love. Imagine how fucking funny it would be if Josuke and Carrera show up and they're, like, together, and Josuke gives the good old, oh, it just sorta happened. You know, that's something that I definitely don't expect to happen, but if I'm right, y'all gotta call me a prophet forever, bro. So the other thing, and this is probably, like, the biggest, like, actual piece of evidence that Araki has plans for this character, but when Carrera makes her last appearance in the manga, that's not just, like, a flashback or somebody mentioning her. She says, we'll meet again, okay, but when that'll be is a secret. Shh. And obviously, Carrera never really showed up again in Jojolion. But something that I found really, really kind of odd is how in the very last chapter, when Josuke, like, meets up with Josefumi's mom, he says, like, yeah, I know who that is. Like, I was told who that was by, you know, Damo and Carrera. And, like, bringing up Carrera again specifically just seems kind of like just a weird thing to do in the last chapter of that part. Since at least to me, like, reminding the audience that this character exists when your part is ending just seems like a weird thing to do. So at least to me, it kind of feels like that's sort of like Araki's way of, you know, reminding us, hey man, Carrera was a character, essentially. So I think if you combine that with the fact that she specifically said to Josuke and kind of like the audience that we'll meet again, I think those two things together kind of implies that this character will show up again. Or who knows, maybe this is a case of like, it'll be we'll be in the year 2032 and JoJo Lands will end, and there will be no Carrera, and it'll be like an actual Araki Forgot. So for sort of a quick like lightning round of stuff that showed up in Jojolion, I'm not sure if rock humans will make another appearance. I think it's possible we might see some rock human characters, but I definitely don't think they'll be like the main like antagonistic force again. Since obviously it's not like every rock human was eliminated, you know, rock humans aren't like the Pillar Men. They most likely exist in every country across the world, so yeah, I think we'll probably see at least one rock human character, but I don't think it'll be like the rock human Lokakaka Smuggling Ring 2 Electric Boogaloo or anything. I do think concepts like the blessings of the earth and curses will be pretty prominent. And I would say I also probably expect there to be a lot of just like weird, hokey, kind of supernatural shit going on in JoJo Lands. Since the idea of like breaking a curse was one of the most central things about Jojolion, like especially in the last couple of chapters you see repeated a couple of times, this is a story about breaking a curse. So I think it's definitely likely that if Araki wants to kind of continue on this trend that like, you know, Steel Ball Run and Jojolion have very much been about, like, these sort of positive forces and negative forces that exist in the universe. Since stuff like Flow and the corpses of saints and the golden ratio are sort of presented as being, like, inherently good things that exist, there's also stuff like calamity and curses, just different stuff like that, and we've seen that Araki has a real interest in just like kind of weird, hokey, supernatural shit like that. Like, obviously in part 1, vampires and zombies were like the central like threat. We've seen yokai appear and thus spoke Kishibe Rohan. So I can see that stuff playing a pretty big role. Who will the JoJo be? I have no idea. I think that's kind of a fool's errand to even attempt to guess that. Like, essentially the only constant we have to go off of is, with the exception of, once again, Johnny, who is kind of a unique case, the main JoJo of every part has always been a descendant of or, like, directly related to a previous JoJo. Josuke was, again, a little bit of an odd circumstance because he's the fusion of Yoshikage Kira and Josefumi. It's still so weird to see that, like, Yoshikage Kira is a descendant of Joseph Joestar in the Steel Ball Run canon, but yeah, with this one, it's pretty hard to say. Like, I think we can fairly safely eliminate Josuke's, like, child as being the next JoJo, but maybe, like, who knows, maybe he shacks up with Carrera, which is what's going to happen, and their kid is the next JoJo, but that would require quite a time skip, so, you know, that's out the window. It obviously can't be any of Holly's direct descendants because Yoshikage Kira is fused into Josuke, and Kei Nijimura is dead. We have a lot of descendants from George Joestar III, who was Johnny's son, so that's a possibility. We also have this universe's Joseph, but as far as we're aware, the only kid he had was Holly. But who knows, maybe he took after, like, the previous Joseph and fucking had an affair? But if that was the case, it wouldn't be that Joseph's kid, because it would have to be like that kid's kid at the very least. So yeah, for this one, I really have no idea. Maybe he'll break tradition and just have it be just like some guy who's not even related to the like Joestar line. So yeah, I don't know, I have no idea. And speaking of I have no idea, when it comes to the stand, no clue. I don't think there's even any point in trying to guess, because it could be literally anything. I managed to make a pretty long video out of essentially just a title. we know nothing about this fucking part. But yeah, that's just a couple of different, like, essentially just shot in the dark guesses I have about the part. All of this could be totally, completely wrong, and that's fine by me. Like I said, this isn't like my dream part 9 or anything. Like, I'll read it regardless of what it is, but those are just a couple of different guesses I have. Yeah, thank you all so much for watching, especially a big thank you to my channel members. But yeah, I'll see you guys next time.